The cold December wind cut through the worn fabric of Willa Valentine's shawl as she stood with her three younger sisters on the wooden platform of the White Oaks, New Mexico train station. Their trunks were stacked beside them like abandoned tombstones, marking the death of their previous life. The station agent had locked the doors an hour ago, leaving the four young women alone as twilight descended on the desolate frontier town. "I don't think Aunt Harriet is coming," whispered Willa, trying to keep her voice steady for her sister's sake. At 22, she had become their guardian since their parents' death from influenza 3 months prior. Their only living relative, Aunt Harriet, had sent a telegraph promising them a home in White Oaks. But as the winter darkness crept across the horizon, that promise seemed as empty as their stomachs. 18-year-old Abigail, the second eldest, clutched 15-year-old Sophia's hand while 13-year-old Emma pressed against Willa's side for warmth. None of them spoke the terrible truth aloud. They had traveled across the country only to be abandoned in a strange town as night approached. "What do we do now?" Abigail finally asked, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Before Willa could answer, the sound of horse hooves broke through the silence. A tall figure on horseback approached the station, silhouetted against the fading light. The sisters huddled closer together, uncertain whether to feel relief or fear. The rider dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent more time in a saddle than on foot. As he stepped into the pool of lamplight, Willa saw a man in his early 30s, his face weathered by sun and wind, dark hair peeking out from beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He wasn't dressed like the gamblers and gunslingers she'd been warned about. His clothes were worn but clean, his manner direct but not threatening. "Station's closed," he said, his deep voice carrying across the platform. "You ladies waiting for someone?" Willa stepped forward, keeping her sisters behind her. "Our aunt was supposed to meet us. Harriet Fletcher," the stranger's expression shifted. "Harriet Fletcher passed away 2 weeks ago. Pneumonia took her quick." The news hit Willa like a physical blow, their last hope gone. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you," the man continued, removing his hat. "I'm Grayson Jameson, own the Silver Creek Ranch about 10 miles out. Knew your aunt, she was a good woman." Willa fought to keep her composure as her sisters began to weep softly behind her. "I'm Willa Valentine. These are my sisters Abigail, Sophia, and Emma. We've come from Philadelphia after our parents died. We have nowhere else to go." Grayson Jameson surveyed the four young women, taking in their city clothes, their pale faces pinched with cold and worry, and the trunks that held all they owned in the world. His gaze lingered on Willa's face, noting the determined set of her jaw despite the fear in her eyes. "My ranch has room," he said simply. "It's not much, but there's shelter and food. You can stay until you figure things out." Willa hesitated, torn between desperate need and caution. "Why would you help strangers?" "Because I was once a stranger here myself," he replied, "and someone helped me." He gestured toward their trunks. "We can load these in my wagon. It's hitched behind the mercantile." "We accept your offer, Mr. Jameson," Willa said after a moment's consideration. There were few options and none better than this one. "Thank you." Within the hour, their trunks were loaded into Grayson's wagon. The sisters climbed aboard, huddling beneath blankets he provided as he guided his team away from White Oaks and into the vast New Mexican wilderness. The wagon jostled along the rutted trail, each bump sending jolts up Willa's spine. Her sisters had fallen into exhausted slumber, but she remained vigilant, watching their mysterious benefactor as he handled the reins with practiced ease. "How much farther?" she asked when they'd been traveling for what seemed like hours. "Another mile or so," Grayson replied without turning. "You should try to sleep." "I prefer to keep watch," she answered. He glanced back then, the moonlight catching his features. "You don't trust me." "I don't know you," Willa corrected. "My sisters are my responsibility." A faint smile touched his lips. "Fair enough, Miss Valentine." The ranch appeared suddenly a collection of buildings nestled in a shallow valley. As they drew closer, Willa could make out a sturdy main house built of timber and stone, a large barn, and several outbuildings. It wasn't grand, but it was well maintained and spoke of hard work rather than poverty. "This is Silver Creek," Grayson announced as he brought the wagon to a stop. Named for the stream that runs behind the property, water's good year-round, even in drought. He helped them down from the wagon, then carried their trunks inside the main house. A Hispanic woman in her 50s was waiting, having been roused by the sound of the wagon. "Alina, these ladies need accommodations," Grayson explained. "Their Aunt Harriet Fletcher passed and they've nowhere to go." Alina nodded solemnly. "I have prepared the guest rooms, senor." "Come, niñas, you must be exhausted." Willa followed Alina through the house, noting its simple but comfortable furnishings. There were 2 guest rooms the sisters would have to share, but after their journey, any bed would feel luxurious. "Mr. Jameson is a good man," Alina said as she showed them where to find water for washing. "A fair employer and honest, you are safe here." After Alina departed, Willa helped her younger sisters prepare for bed. "It's just temporary," she assured them as they settled beneath thick quilts. "Until we can make other arrangements." "I like it here," Emma murmured sleepily. "It's quiet, not like the city." "We know nothing about this place or Mr. Jameson," Abigail countered. "We can't simply impose on his charity," Willa sighed. "We'll discuss our options in the morning. For now, let's be grateful for a roof and warm beds." Sleep came reluctantly to Willa that night. Her mind raced with questions about their future and the enigmatic rancher who had rescued them from certain disaster. Dawn broke clear and cold over Silver Creek Ranch. Willa rose early, determined to speak with Grayson about what came next. She found him in the kitchen where Alina was preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Miss Valentine," he greeted her. "I hope you slept well." "As well as could be expected," she replied. "Mr. Jameson, I need to discuss our situation. We're grateful for your hospitality, but we can't impose indefinitely." He gestured for her to sit at the rough-hewn table. "I've been thinking about that. Your Aunt Harriet owned a small cottage and some land on the edge of White Oaks. It's yours by right, being her only kin, but it's been empty for weeks and likely needs work before it's habitable." Hope sparked in Willa's chest. "We have a place to go then." "Eventually," he qualified, "but winter's setting in hard. The cottage isn't insulated properly and you'd be isolated there. I suggest you and your sisters stay here until spring. In return, perhaps you could help Alina with the household. She's getting on in years and could use assistance." Willa considered his proposal. "And what of my sisters?" "They need education, structure. The schoolmistress in White Oaks takes boarders during the week. The younger 2 could stay there Monday through Friday if you'd allow it. As for Miss Abigail—" "I can work," came Abigail's voice from the doorway. She stepped into the kitchen, already dressed for the day. "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Jameson." Grayson nodded approvingly. "The mercantile in town needs help. Owner's wife just had twins and they're overwhelmed. Pays fair wages." Willa felt a strange mixture of relief and unease. His solutions were practical, even generous, yet accepting meant acknowledging they couldn't manage on their own. "What do you get from this arrangement, Mr. Jameson?" she asked directly. He met her gaze steadily. "A functioning household. Alina cooks and cleans, but this place needs a woman's touch. Curtains are falling apart, linens need mending, and I can't remember when the pantry was last properly organized." "Domestic work," Willa said flatly. "Honest work," he corrected. "And temporary. By spring, you'll have options." Willa had grown up in a Philadelphia society family. She'd been educated at fine schools, trained in music and art, prepared for marriage into a good family. Manual labor had never been part of her expected future. But her parents' deaths and their subsequent discovery of the family's financial ruin had already shattered those expectations. "We accept your terms, Mr. Jameson," she said finally. "Until spring." The first weeks at Silver Creek Ranch established a rhythm to their new life. Emma and Sophia were enrolled in the White Oak School, staying with the kindly schoolmistress during the week and returning to the ranch on weekends. Abigail secured the position at the mercantile, riding into town with Grayson each Monday and back on Saturday. Willa threw herself into making the ranch house more comfortable. She mended curtains and linens, organized the pantry, and worked alongside Alina in the kitchen, learning to cook frontier-style meals that were hearty if not refined. The work was exhausting but satisfying in a way she hadn't anticipated. Grayson proved to be a fair employer and a considerate host. He respected their privacy, often taking meals in the bunkhouse with his ranch hands rather than intruding on the sisters' time together. But in the evenings, he sometimes joined them by the fire, reading from his collection of books or teaching them card games. It was during these quiet evenings that Willa began to see beyond his weathered exterior. Grayson was well-read and thoughtful, with a dry humor that often surprised her into laughter. He spoke little of his past, but she gathered he'd come west from Boston after the Civil War, seeking a fresh start like so many others. One evening in late January, while a winter storm howled outside, Willa found Grayson alone in his study examining ledgers with a troubled expression. "Is something wrong?" she asked from the doorway. He looked up, seemingly unsurprised by her presence. "Cattle prices are falling. The railroads changed its routes, making it harder to get herds to market. Nothing we haven't weathered before." Willa stepped into the room, drawn by his casual use of we, as if she were truly part of the ranch's concerns. "My father was in finance. Perhaps I could help with the books." Grayson raised an eyebrow but slid the ledger toward her. Willa sat beside him, their shoulders nearly touching as she pored over the numbers. The proximity made her oddly conscious of his breathing, the clean scent of soap that clung to him. "You've been tracking expenses by category but not by season," she observed, focusing on the task. "If you reorganize this section, you might see patterns that would help with planning." For the next hour, they worked together, reorganizing his accounting system. Willa found herself enjoying the intellectual challenge and his receptiveness to her suggestions. When they finished, she felt a curious reluctance to end their collaboration. "Thank you," Grayson said, closing the ledger. "You have a keen mind for business." "My father insisted all his daughters understand finance," Willa explained. "He said a woman at the mercy of men's financial decisions is vulnerable indeed." "A wise man," Grayson commented. "Though I imagine he didn't foresee his daughters ending up on a struggling cattle ranch in New Mexico territory." "No," Willa smiled sadly. "This wasn't part of his plan for us." "And what was his plan?" "Suitable marriages, comfortable homes in Philadelphia society. Grandchildren to bounce on his knee," she sighed. "When he and Mother died, we discovered the family business was failing. The creditors took everything except our personal belongings. Aunt Harriet was our last hope." Grayson's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your losses, Willa, all of them." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Thank you, Grayson." Something shifted between them that evening, a lowering of barriers, an acknowledgement of mutual respect. Over the following weeks, they began to seek each other's company more frequently. Willa helped with the ranch accounts, while Grayson taught her about the cattle business. Their conversations expanded beyond the practical to books they'd read, places they'd seen, and eventually, the dreams they'd once harbored. February brought a brutal cold snap that tested the ranch's resources. Cattle needed extra feed, water troughs froze nightly, and the house required constant attention to keep warm. Willa worked alongside Alina from dawn until dusk, cooking hearty stews and baking bread to sustain the ranch hands through their grueling outdoor work. One evening, Grayson returned later than usual, his face lined with exhaustion. The day's efforts to break ice and move cattle to sheltered areas had clearly taken their toll. "You should rest," Willa told him as she set a bowl of stew before him in the kitchen. The ranch hands had already eaten and departed for the bunkhouse, and Alina had retired for the night. "Too much still to do," he replied, though he sank gratefully into the chair. Willa poured him coffee, adding a splash of whiskey from the bottle he kept for medicinal purposes. "Drink this first. Then we can discuss what needs doing." He looked up at her, surprise giving way to appreciation. "I'm stronger than I look," she said with a small smile. "And I've learned a few things these past months." Grayson's laugh was warm and genuine. "That you have, Willa Valentine, that you have." Later that night, they worked together in the barn, checking on a pregnant heifer that showed signs of distress. The animal's labored breathing filled the straw-scented space as Willa held a lantern high, illuminating Grayson's careful examination. "She's struggling, but I think she'll pull through," he said finally, stroking the heifer's flank. "Just needs watching." I can stay with her, Willa offered. You've been working since before dawn. So have you, he pointed out. We'll take shifts. They settled on opposite sides of the stall, the lantern between them casting golden light across their faces. Outside, the wind howled, but the barn was relatively warm, insulated by hay and livestock. Tell me about Boston, Willa said after a while, curious about the life he'd left behind. Grayson was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Not much to tell. My father was a physician, expected me to follow in his footsteps. But you didn't want to be a doctor. I enlisted instead, Union Army. I was 19 when the war broke out. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Saw things no doctor could heal. When it was over, I couldn't go back to that life. Willa nodded, understanding more than she could express. So you came west. Worked cattle drives for years, saved every penny. Bought this place when the previous owner died of rattlesnake bite. He glanced around the barn. It wasn't much then, just the house and 20 acres. Built the rest myself with help. You've created something remarkable, Willa said softly. A home, a community. His eyes met hers across the stall. It was just a place until recently. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Something was growing between them, something neither had anticipated but both were beginning to acknowledge. The heifer's distress interrupted the moment. She struggled to her feet, then collapsed again, her sides heaving. Grayson moved quickly, his hands sure as he checked her condition. The calf's turned wrong, he said grimly. I'll need to help her. What followed was a tense hour of difficult labor. Willa assisted without hesitation, following Grayson's instructions to bring water, hold the lantern higher, steady the heifer's head. Her fine Philadelphia upbringing hadn't prepared her for the raw reality of birth on a frontier ranch, but she found herself equal to the task. When the calf finally emerged, wet, gangly, but alive, the sense of triumph they shared was profound. Willa watched as Grayson cleared the newborn's airways and helped it to its feet, guiding it toward its mother's teat. Life finds a way, he murmured, watching the calf take its first wobbling steps. Willa realized she was seeing a different side of him, not the capable rancher or the reserved employer, but a man who found joy in the simple miracle of new life. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on the stall door. Grayson turned his palm upward, his fingers intertwining with hers. The contact was simple but profound, an acknowledgement of something neither was ready to name. They remained like that, hands joined, watching mother and calf in comfortable silence, until dawn painted the barn windows with pale light. March brought the first hints of spring to white oaks. Snow melted, revealing patches of green beneath. The sisters' weekend gatherings at the ranch grew more animated as they discussed the possibilities that warmer weather would bring. We should visit Aunt Harriet's cottage next week, Abigail suggested one Sunday afternoon as they sat on the ranch house porch. If it needs as much work as Mr. Jameson says, we should start planning repairs. Willa nodded, though the thought of leaving Silver Creek created an unexpected hollowness in her chest. Yes, that would be sensible. Do you think we could really live there? Sophia asked. Just us women, I mean. Many women manage on their own, Willa assured her, though she shared the concern. The frontier was unforgiving and 4 city-bred sisters would face countless challenges. I like it here, Emma declared. At 13, she had adapted most readily to ranch life, following Alina around the kitchen and learning to collect eggs without getting pecked. Mr. Jameson says I have a natural way with the chickens. The mention of Grayson brought warmth to Willa's cheeks. Their relationship had evolved in subtle ways since the night in the barn. Nothing improper had occurred, but there was an undeniable current between them now, shared glances, fingers brushing while passing dishes, conversations that lasted late into the evening. Mr. Jameson has been very kind, Willa acknowledged carefully, but we can't impose on his hospitality forever. Abigail gave her a searching look. Is that really what you want, Willa? To leave, before she could answer, the sound of approaching horses interrupted them. Grayson appeared around the bend in the drive, accompanied by a distinguished-looking gentleman in a suit that marked him as a city dweller. Ladies, Grayson greeted them, dismounting. "This is Judge Thornton from Santa Fe. He's here about your aunt's estate." The judge proved to be a bearer of unexpected news. Over coffee in Grayson's study, he explained that Harriet Fletcher's property encompassed not just the cottage but a significant parcel of land adjacent to it. "More importantly," the judge continued, "your aunt held the deed to a silver mine. Small operation but profitable, she was a shrewd businesswoman." Willa exchanged shocked glances with Abigail. "A silver mine, she never mentioned this in her letters." "Harriet was discreet about her affairs," Judge Thornton said. "The mine produces steady income, not a fortune, but enough to live comfortably. As her only heirs, it's all yours now." The revelation changed everything. With financial independence, the sisters could establish themselves properly in White Oaks. They could hire workers to repair the cottage, perhaps even build a larger home. Their future, which had seemed so precarious, suddenly bloomed with possibilities. Yet as the judge outlined the details of their inheritance, Willa found herself watching Grayson's face. His expression remained neutral, but she detected something in his eyes: resignation, perhaps, or worse, relief at the prospect of their departure. The thought stung more than she cared to admit. After the judge departed, promising to return with the final paperwork the following week, an awkward silence fell over the ranch house. The sisters retreated to their rooms to discuss this dramatic change in circumstances, while Willa sought out Grayson, finding him in the barn checking tack. "So," she said, leaning against the stable door, "it seems we'll be leaving sooner than expected." His hands stilled on the leather reins he was oiling. "Seems so." "Judge Thornton says the cottage can be made habitable within a month." Grayson nodded, resuming his work. "Good news for you and your sisters." "Yes," Willa agreed, though the word felt hollow. "We're very fortunate." Another silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Grayson set aside the tack and turned to face her. "I'm happy for you, Willa," he said, his voice sincere despite the distance in his eyes. "You deserve stability after everything you've been through." "Thank you," she replied automatically, "for everything. Your kindness these past months has meant more than I can express." He inclined his head in acknowledgement, then picked up his tools again, a clear dismissal. Willa stood for a moment longer, waiting for words that didn't come before turning to leave. "Willa," he called as she reached the barn door. When she looked back, his expression was conflicted. "The ranch will be quiet without you and your sisters." It wasn't what she'd hoped to hear, but it was something. "You'll manage," she said softly. "You always have." The following week was filled with preparations. Willa and Abigail rode into White Oaks with Grayson to inspect their aunt's cottage. It was small but solidly built, needing primarily cosmetic repairs and thorough cleaning. They hired local workers to begin the process, using funds advanced by Judge Thornton against their inheritance. Meanwhile, life at Silver Creek continued its familiar rhythm. Willa worked alongside Alina, taught Emma to make bread, discussed books with Sophia when she returned for the weekend. But a shadow hung over these activities, the knowledge that they were temporary, final iterations of a life that was ending. Grayson maintained a polite distance, spending more time with his ranch hands and less in the main house. When their paths crossed, his manner was cordial but reserved, as if he were already adjusting to their absence. The night before Judge Thornton was due to return with the final paperwork, a violent spring storm swept across the territory. Rain pounded the roof of the ranch house, while lightning split the sky and thunder shook the windows. The sisters gathered in the parlor, finding comfort in each other's company as the elements raged outside. Grayson entered, rain dripping from his slicker. "Creek's rising fast," he reported. "I'm moving the horses to higher ground. The hands are bringing the cattle in from the lower pastures." "Is there anything we can do?" Willa asked, rising. He shook his head. "Stay inside. If the water reaches the porch, move to the upper floor. Will you be safe out there?" The question escaped before she could contain it, her concern evident. His expression softened momentarily. "I've weathered worse. Don't worry." After he departed, the sisters prepared for a potential flood. They moved valuable items upstairs, gathered candles and matches in case the lamps failed, and heated water for coffee and tea. The storm intensified as night fell. Willa stood at the window, straining to see through the darkness and driving rain. Occasionally, lantern light would appear as the men moved between buildings, but she couldn't distinguish one figure from another. Hours passed with no sign of Grayson. Elena assured them he knew the property better than anyone and would take no unnecessary risks, but Willa's anxiety grew as midnight approached with no word. When the front door finally burst open, admitting a drenched and mud-splattered Grayson, relief flooded through her. She rushed forward with a blanket as he shed his sodden outer garments. "The livestock?" she asked, helping him toward the fire. "Safe," he confirmed, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Bridge to town is washed out, though. No one's going anywhere for a few days." Willa handed him a steaming cup of coffee. "Judge Thornton won't make it tomorrow, then?" "No," Grayson agreed, meeting her eyes for the first time in days. "You're stuck here a while longer." Something in his tone made her breath catch. "Is that so terrible?" He studied her face in the firelight. "I was beginning to think you couldn't leave soon enough." "Why would you think that? You've been busy with plans, the cottage, the mine, your new life in White Oaks." He took a long drink of coffee. "It's what you wanted, independence for you and your sisters, what you've worked toward." Willa sat beside him, close enough to feel the dampness still emanating from his clothes. "That's what I thought I wanted," she admitted quietly. "What I believed was best for my sisters. But lately I've wondered." "Wondered what?" She met his gaze directly. "If there might be another path, one I hadn't considered." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a cautious hope. "Willa, I know it's presumptuous," she continued hastily. "You never asked for 4 women to descend on your life. You've been generous beyond measure, and I have no right to expect." "Willa," he interrupted, setting his cup aside to take her hands in his. "Stop, listen to me." She fell silent, heart pounding as he gathered his thoughts. "When I found you at that train station, I offered shelter because it was the right thing to do. I didn't expect." He paused, searching for words. "I didn't expect you, your strength, your determination, the way you stepped into this life as if you were born to it." "I've made countless mistakes," she protested, "and learned from each one," he countered. "Do you know what this place was before you came? Just a ranch, functional, productive, but not a home." His thumbs traced circles on her palms. "You changed that, all of you, but especially you, Willa." Hope unfurled in her chest. "What are you saying, Grayson?" "I'm saying that the thought of you leaving has been tearing me apart," he admitted. "But I had no right to ask you to stay. You and your sisters have a chance at independence now, real freedom. And if I told you I've come to care for this place, for the life we've built here," Willa leaned closer. "For you," the vulnerability in his eyes nearly undid her. "I'd say I've been falling in love with you since you reorganized my ledgers and told me I was doing it all wrong." A laugh bubbled up through the tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "That long, longer probably," he confessed with a smile, "but that's when I knew I was in trouble." Willa's hands tightened around his. "My sisters would always be welcome here," he assured her. "This place is large enough for all of us. Emma already treats it like home. Sophia could continue her studies, there are good schools in Santa Fe when she's ready, and Abigail strikes me as a young woman who will chart her own course regardless." "You've thought about this," Willa realized, warmth spreading through her. "Every day since Judge Thornton arrived," Grayson admitted. "Every night since the barn, if I'm being honest." The mention of that night, the calf's birth, their joined hands in the lantern light, brought a flush to Willa's cheeks. "I thought perhaps I had imagined." "You didn't," he said softly. "I just didn't think I had the right to speak. You came here out of necessity, not choice." "Sometimes necessity leads us where choice never would," she whispered, "to places we never knew we belonged." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but within the ranch house, something new and fragile was taking shape. Grayson's hand rose to cup Willa's cheek, his touch gentle despite the calluses earned through years of ranch work. "I love you, Willa Valentine," he said, the words both declaration and question. "If you need time to consider," she silenced him by closing the distance between them, her lips finding his in a kiss that answered more eloquently than words. When they finally parted, both breathless, the world had fundamentally changed. "I love you too," she said, the truth of it resonating through her entire being. "I think I have for months," he smiled, the joy transforming his weathered face. Then stay, not as my housekeeper or accountant, stay as my wife, make this place your home our home. Yes, she answered without hesitation. Yes, the storm that had threatened disaster became instead the beginning of their new life together. When Judge Thornton finally arrived 3 days later, he found not 4 sisters preparing to leave, but a family planning their future at Silver Creek Ranch. The silver mine provided capital to expand the ranch operations. The cottage in White Oaks became a townhouse where the sisters could stay when business or social occasions brought them to town. Abigail eventually married the mercantile owner's son, combining their businesses into the largest trading post in the territory. Sophia continued her education, eventually becoming a teacher at the White Oaks School. Emma, to no one's surprise, discovered a talent for animal husbandry and became Grayson's right hand in ranch operations. And Willa, who had once expected a conventional life in Philadelphia society, found profound fulfillment as the mistress of Silver Creek Ranch and Grayson Jameson's wife. Their wedding, held that June beneath the cottonwood trees by the creek, marked not the beginning but the continuation of a love story that had started on a cold train platform with a simple offer. My ranch has room. 2 years later, as Willa rocked their infant son in the same parlor where she had first realized her feelings for Grayson, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought them all to this place. 4 abandoned sisters, a compassionate cowboy, and the home they had built together, not just a ranch with room, but a life filled with love that expanded to embrace them all.